Another offseason without Nick Saban, but who takes the crown as the SEC's best head coach? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the Rapport. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for giving us a listen on this very fine Tuesday. Joining me, as he will every single week this offseason, is my good friend Chris Phillips from SEC Unfiltered. Chris, we're in the offseason. It's talking season. It's officially talking season. And today we're talking about the landscape of head coaches in the SEC. Nick Saban is no more. Alabama fans came to a realization that Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban incarnate. There is only one Nick Saban, and he's gone. He's talking now for a living. But who's the best here? Is there an opening? As we record this, there's a national championship later tonight, and there's no SEC team in the national championship. We know that the investment in head coaches in the SEC is as high as anywhere in college sports. Who's the best? Who's the best at this right now?
Well, Mike, first things first, I appreciate you having me on. It's kind of like you read my mind, Mike, because later this week, I'm actually going to be dropping my postseason power rankings when it comes to head coaches for the 2024 season. So, again, it's great minds think alike here, Mike. So I came prepared. And, again, you mentioned no SEC teams in the national title. Is it really a national title game if an SEC team didn't play in it? I don't feel like it is, but it's always a pleasure to jump on with you, Mike. And I'll just say, number one for me, and again, when the list comes out, we'll have a full graphic and everything, and maybe you and I can discuss it even more next week. But I've still got Kirby Smart atop the SEC.
Okay.
I understand that, some will argue Steve Sarkisian, maybe he made a deeper run in the college football playoff, but I mean, Kirby beat him twice. I don't know how at this point. Again, I know Georgia didn't have quite the season. Anytime a season at this point, Mike, doesn't end in a national championship in Athens, it's a disappointing year. And Georgia certainly, right? They were very inconsistent. They made mistakes that wasn't characteristic of Kirby Smart coach teams, but it's still Kirby. You give me one game to win, it's all on the line. I'm going with Kirby Smart every single time. I think still he's head and shoulders above the best coach in the conference.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. When in doubt, vote for the guy that holds recent national championships, multiple, and that's Kirby Smart. Certainly, if you look at recruiting as well, too, I think it's pretty clearly Kirby Smart. But, there was an idea that Brian Kelly was moving up those ranks quickly. He comes to the SEC, wins the SEC West in his first season as head coach, produces a Heisman the next season. Brian Kelly is doing work here at LSU. Their recruiting is great. However, they have not made the playoffs under Brian Kelly. And there are questions about whether he is fool's gold or not. He left Notre Dame saying that he wanted to be someplace where they had the resources to win it. And Notre Dame is in the national title as we speak.
Well, you think about it too, Mike. I mean, you mentioned, is he fool's gold? He hasn't made a playoff. There's only 3 coaches in this conference, Mike, that have made an SEC championship game. And Brian Kelly is one of them. The other 2 who were just in it, Kirby Smart and Steve Sarkisian. I mean, if we want to start throwing that around,
all right.
I list Brian Kelly in my top 3 coaches. Again, my top 3 are Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian. That number 3 spot is very, very highly up for debate. I will say, Mike, I'll own this one going into the 2024 season because I dropped the head coaching rankings actually at Media Days last year.
Okay.
I had Kalen DeBoer at number 3. He had just went to a national championship game, but maybe it was a little bit of some premature hype and praise because I think we saw this year in the SEC, Kalen DeBoer's got a ways to go to be considered among the elites. But I put Brian Kelly at 3rd because, to your point, Mike, I mean, again, there's only 3 coaches who have been in the SEC title game in this league, and it's those 3 gentlemen, Smart, Sarkisian, and Kelly. So I listen, I know Brian Kelly, he's got to go win a season opener, number 1. They open up at Clemson this season. He's got to get to the college football playoff. You got to love what they did in the portal. Obviously, hiring Blake Baker the offseason prior was a great move, but they got to take that next step. But, I mean, right now, Mike, my question would be for this, those that push back, who would you put at number 3 if not Brian Kelly? Are you going Josh Heupel? Are you going Lane Kiffin? Are you going Kalen DeBoer? I doubt anyone who watches this network is going to go Kalen DeBoer. I mean, I just you can make a case for many, but I still just look at a guy in Brian Kelly. At least there's proof of concept. He beat a Nick Saban. He's got to an SEC title. That's more than many other coaches can say in this league for sure.
Yeah, I think after Kirby Smart, it's a lot of close but no cigar type situation, things going on. And I think Lane Kiffin comes to mind as the guy who might be next up. But again, fool's gold, right?
I actually might put Josh Heupel ahead of Lane Kiffin one spot. So I don't hate you. I've got Heupel at 4, Lane Kiffin at 5. It's hard for me to put Kiffin, and I like Kiffin a lot. And I know you're not a big Ole Miss Kiffin guy, which is fine. But it's hard for me to put Kiffin any higher when you had the most talented roster in school history and you couldn't get to the college ball playoff.
Yeah,
I just that to me is like,
I agree.
We got to hold you accountable for that. And I look at Josh Heupel again. I don't even know if Josh Heupel gets enough credit for what he's done at Tennessee in such a short time. The dumpster fire he inherited there in Knoxville, and he's gotten into a place where Tennessee fans are complaining about winning double-digit games and going to a playoff, and how quickly we forget what Tennessee football was for a decade. So I do want to go back, Mike, to something you said though. What's going to be fascinating? No coaches fired, no coaching changes after 2024. I think a lot of it to do just because there were some coaches that did just enough. Also,
when was the last time that happened?
It's been a long time, but I think the revenue sharing thing, Mike, as well, with this uncertainty from the financial aspect of what that $20 million or so is going to do for a lot of guys. I think what that means, though, Mike, there's going to be bloodshed in the SEC after 2025. I will not be surprised if we have as many as 4 or 5 openings, and whether that's firings, retirements, mutual imparting of ways, guys taking NFL jobs. Yeah, I think that's going to lead to the floodgates sort of opening after the 25 season.
Yeah, the interesting research to do there. Coaching fires in the SEC by year. I can't remember a year where we had no coaching.
It's been a long time.
Yeah,
it never happens. It never happens. Especially if you go beyond just firings and go to, again, retirements, took a different job. I mean, the last time that the same exact coaches came back, yeah, I couldn't tell you when it happened, honestly.
Yeah, really going to be interesting. Look, obviously, Hugh Freeze, I think, is going to be on somewhat of a hot seat. So after the season, is he in that coaching change category? We're going to take a look at that right after a quick word from our friends at the Rogue Shop, Chris. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code Rapport to get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. If you're going to be stressing the national title game, visit the Rogue Shop. My money is on Ohio State. I had big money on them, Chris, to beat Oregon. They delivered in spades. I will not stop talking about that ever, because F Oregon. Also, if the Rogue Shop makes you hungry, visit our friends at Los Amigos Restaurant. You can visit them at 1220 Fox Run Ave, Suite 200 in Opelika, Alabama. Clean eats, great community, and a great place to watch the game. Los Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Also, this show is brought to you by our friends at Manscaped. Visit manscaped.com and use code Rapport for 20% off plus free shipping, joining the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with their personal grooming and care. It's a new year. Be a new you with Manscaped. Your ladies will thank you, fellas. Manscaped.com. Use code Rapport to get 20% off plus free shipping. Jumping back into the conversation, as we mentioned, no coaching changes in the SEC, but certainly there will be some after this season. I guarantee we will not have 2 straight years of that. In that next tier, it feels like a jumble of coaches, Chris. When you look at the SEC, you've got our guy Beamer, who is interesting case.
I think he's pretty safe after 2024.
Yeah.
I mean, winning 9 games at South Carolina and beating Clemson, that buys you a lot of time.
Yeah, I don't
buy you time.
I don't know if he ever climbs into the upper tier of SEC head coaches. He's been there long.
I don't know that he does either. I don't know that he does either, but I think at South Carolina, Mike, when you understand the dynamic, you win 8 or 9 games there per year, you can keep that job as long as you want.
Then you got Mike Elko, who came in his first year at Texas A&M, and it was looking great. I mean, as a matter of fact, down the stretch, they were in control of their own destiny.
7-1.
Yeah.
Firm control and lost 4 of the last 5.
He inherited a lot of talent and a ton of resources as well, too. So it wasn't exactly what I would term a rebuild, more than kind of like a reorganization at Texas A&M. And then, after that, you've got, the Eli Drinkwitzes of the world. You've got how
about the Billy Napiers? I mean, Napier elevating. Still seat is warm, not the hottest seat, but still a warm seat.
Probably the most underrated coaching job. Was there a seat hotter than his coming into this year? I mean, everybody
I think everyone proclaimed him, everyone, including myself, proclaimed him as a dead man walking. He stared that schedule right in the face and got Florida to 8 wins. So I still don't think, Mike, we talk enough about what he did in that season. I think because down the stretch we look at some of these teams that, LSU wasn't as good as expected. Ole Miss didn't do what they were, Florida State was terrible, but still, I mean, what he did to get that team to 7 regular season wins, 8 with a bowl game. I mean, everybody in the preseason would have said coach of the year.
His losses were Miami, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, and this was widely regarded to be the hardest schedule we've ever seen in college football history, right?
Yep.
You got 12 games, 11 Power 5 teams. The only reprieve they had was Samford. That was it, right? And they ended up winning that game 45-7. It was their second game of the season. After that, they played Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and then Florida State. Now, obviously, anybody losing to Florida State at this point feels like a terrible loss. But he did a great job. And then you've got Auburn. And I want to close today's segment talking about where Hugh Freeze should be on this list of SEC head coaches. This is a guy who owns 2 head-to-head wins versus Nick Saban. Chris, that's a short club of people, man. Like they should have jackets and special Dakota rings. I beat Nick Saban. It was, and he hung his hat on that. It was his claim to fame, essentially, in his time at Ole Miss. Was they went up and he made a statement saying that he should have more wins against Nick Saban. Those games were close. I mean, I don't know that I disagree with them. I think it was kind of a lame statement, but like it's true in a sense. Where should Hugh Freeze fall this season in the list of SEC head coaches? Because we agree it's Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Brian Kelly, and or Lane Kiffin, and then everybody else. Right? Where does Hugh Freeze fall in this conversation?
Mike, this is where we close out the show with a bang.
Okay.
Because with my rankings that'll drop later this week, I've got Hugh Freeze in the 15 spot out of 16 head coaches. I don't care anymore that you beat Nick Saban. That was 10 years ago, man. Hugh Freeze of today, there's a lot I need to see. There's a lot to prove it for me. And I'm just going to say this. I won't name any names, but all the chatter I've heard about Hugh off the field, it didn't help my case when ranking him. I'm starting to lose faith that Hugh Freeze is the answer. I'm sorry. And I know, listen, I know that there's a lot of optimism. I dropped way too early record predictions. I had Auburn at 7-5. I got a lot of people in the comments saying Auburn's going to win 10 games. I wouldn't be upset to see it. Wouldn't be upset for my guy, Mike G. Hugh Freeze got to show me, man. I just, at some point, you are what you are. And Hugh Freeze was a really good head coach when the RPO just got invented, if you will, and that was like a new thing in college football. But, man, he at times to me feels like a guy that's the game's passed him by a little bit. I don't know if he's really the guy anymore that beat Nick Saban. I'm not a Hugh Freeze. I don't dislike Hugh Freeze. I'm just simply going off of what I've seen from him 2 years on the Plains, what he did with a team that easily should have won 8 games last year. I have no confidence he's going to take this group of talent and that's going to translate into a 9 or 10 win season in 2025. So, I mean, listen, he's on one of the hottest seats in the SEC for a reason. And then again, also all the other stuff. I know he's done great recruiting. They pulled in guys in the portal, but all the other stuff I hear as well, some of the some of the extracurriculars going on behind closed doors, the way certain guys feel about him, it just, for me, it doesn't help my case. I'm stock sold on Hugh Freeze right now. So he'll have to change my mind in 25.
15 out of 16. Like, look, they finished, what, 14 out of 16 in the standings, right? I mean, so that's not a crazy statement based on how Auburn finished, right? 14th in the league at 2-6 in conference. The only teams technically in the standings that were worse were Kentucky at 1-7 in conference.
And here's the thing too, Mike. Here's the thing too, Mike. Not to cut you off, but I'll say this. You know, I can hear the arguments of like, what about Mark Stoops? Well, Mark Stoops has won 10 games at Kentucky. Well, what about Sam Pittman? Well, Sam Pittman won 9 games at Arkansas. What about Brent Venables? Well, God, he won 10 games at OU. I know it wasn't in the SEC, but he's still done it. Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I mean, again, how long can we cling to the Ole Miss success? It was 10 years ago. Like, we're not even remotely, like, the world is completely different now, you know? So I don't put a lot of stock in that, man. Like, I don't care that he beat Nick Saban a decade ago. That to me is becoming more irrelevant by the day. So it doesn't move the needle for me anymore that he did that.
Yeah, I will say this, right? You know, the coaches that are ahead of him, they beat him. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I think it is kind of a show me situation here. If you don't belong down at the bottom of the list, you have to show people at some point. You know, when I think back to Jimbo Fisher, for example, every resource you could wish for as a coach, he had at his disposal at Texas A&M. And I'm not saying Hugh Freeze is Jimbo Fisher, but in terms of resources, he has a lot available to him. And he's gone out and done it in recruiting. So there was a lot made of the talent gap when he arrived on the Plains. I think 3 years in, we should no longer be talking about the talent gap. This is your team. This roster is what you built it to be 3 years in. And you've got to find a way forward, especially in the era of the portal where you can flip a roster quickly. I thought they did good work in the portal this offseason. So this is the year to prove that you don't belong down there. I can't say that. I can't really push back a ton against your stance here. It's just up to him to go out and prove people wrong. There were a lot of people who didn't think that. I mean, I covered Central Florida, so I'm in the Big 12 football. Nobody saw Arizona State. They were picked by the media to finish last in the Big 12, and they won it and made the college football playoff. As a matter of fact, Texas versus Arizona State was probably the best playoff game we've seen. So they made, and I think even though they lost the game, they validated their stance there, and you can defy the odds. You can defy what everybody is saying about you. You don't have to be what everybody says you are. You just got to go out and you got to do it on the field. And I think that's where Hugh Freeze is at right now. So I as much as I want to push back on you on this one, I have to say I do think this is a show me year for Hugh Freeze with Auburn football to prove if you're not over the hill, if the game hasn't passed you by, this is the year that you prove it. You've gone out and you've gotten Jackson Arnold. And whether you think that he's the future or not, you just have to get it done with him. We can no longer talk about, you can't put this off on the players anymore. You have to find a way to make it work with Jackson Arnold.
I think the way that it looks, Mike, is important. I think also we're having a similar conversation to what we had last offseason, that it feels like, to me at least, right now, way too early, 8 wins feels like the magic number. They got to get to 8. They got to get at least to 8, show proof of concept, have a signature win probably of some sort, not lose any games that you're not supposed, like you can't go lose to Baylor. You can't do it, right? Like you got to, like, because I feel like you could argue, like the loss to Cal, for example. I mean, that was just one that derailed the season before it even got going. You can't have any of those hiccups, have a signature win. I think probably get to 8 or more. Offense has got to take a major step forward. Some things have got to happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but to your point, it's just we got to wait and see because we just haven't seen it to this point.
To your point about 8 wins, 10 teams in the SEC finished their season with 8 wins or more. 10. Yeah, what you're asking for is for him to be one of the 10.
And Auburn's schedule, you could argue again, it's not like a Texas or Texas A&M manageable, but it's a fairly it's a gettable schedule if you're doing what you feel like you're capable of.
I agree. Great conversation, Chris. Look, I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Mike, it's always a pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on. We're on X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Thankfully, still TikTok. It's alive and well. Wherever you get your content, YouTube, podcast, of course, you can find us there daily. And, of course, our website, sefunfiltered.com.
That's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. Thank you so much for joining us daily. We hope you'll come back. If you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, worry.